So we have two guest speakers today. We have Jill and we have Caroline. Jill is going to start us off. Um, unless somebody has something else to say, or I'm going to hand it over to Jill.
Thank you, Rory. So this session, I am hoping, will indicate how enterprise governance has a big bearing on how our economy um, performs, and will give some ideas of how co-ops and social enterprises behave differently from ordinary firms and how we can support their growth and evolution. So if I can share my screen now. Ah, that doesn't seem to be what I was expecting. Well, that's what I want is slideshow. Is that better? Can you see my screen now? I'm doing this in the context of an economy which has several layers, and the biggest and greatest is our ecological system. We've seen how since 1987, the date in the year in which humanity's resource consumption exceeds Earth's capacity to regenerate that year has moved from December to August the 20th in 2013 and August the 1st in 2024. It's still moving forward, so our consumption is still exceeding the Earth's capacity more year by year, but not by as much as previously. So it's kind of slowing its increase. And of course, we want to see that curve bend down so that the Earth is better able to regenerate year by year. Within that, the human economy, the gift economy, accounts for an enormous amount of our provisioning. Most caring, lifeboats, blood donorship, charities, groups, people support each other. Within that, there are exchange systems, some of which is in kind, swapping babysitting circles, local exchange trading systems. But some of it is in money, and that's the market system. So when we talk about the market system, we're talking about a proportion of the whole provisional economy. The gift relationship, I just think this needs honouring, and we too can nurture it. Most caring takes place in families with neighbours, but often further afield, and it can be nourished by shared feasts, events where people swap things. I know a toddler who said, "Who did this cardigan belong to before I had it?" As if that was the most obvious normal thing. Great. Um, Blood donorship. One gets much better quality blood in countries where this is voluntary than where blood is paid for, unfortunately. So I am thinking of this in the context of Quaker values that apply to economics, and some of the main ones are concern for fairness, inclusion, honesty, respect for nature and animal life, valued as well as people, and respecting the interdependence, the web of life. Here are some of the principles of cooperation set down not by the very earliest co-ops, but by the Rochdale pioneers in Britain in 1844. And these will feel familiar, I'm sure. Open, inclusive membership, democratic control, member economic participation, independence, education and training, cooperation among cooperatives, and concern for the wider community. So these and the values that they've laid out have been within the co-op movement from the start. So although co-ops are profit-making businesses, they have a different ethic from normal um, enterprises. In Britain, they're formed from people who have a common bond. This is the legislation. It could be that they're producer co-ops working in the same business. It could be that they're customers. And the Rochdale was buying in bulk so that people could buy retail at lower cost. Everyone owns a share in the business and has a vote over how it's run. Below, we have a village shop, which is a co-op, a community pub, which is a co-op, and a community bookshop in a small town near me. So co-ops can run all sorts of kinds of businesses. I'd like to tell you a couple of stories now about the difference that co-ops have made to particular areas. Imagine the Basque Country, a mountainous part of northern Spain, um, at the end of the last war, full of poverty and unemployment. And remember, there'd been a civil war, so lots of social tensions. It was not a happy place. A young priest, Jose Maria Arizmendi Arrieta, worked with groups in Mondragon, which was then a small town, and created a housing charity. And then, because he worked with apprentices graduating with engineering skills, he set up a co-op to make fridges to employ them. This was successful, and soon there was a need for more co-ops to provide components, and other co-ops were set up. And today, the town of Mondragon has a whole network of co-ops which extends wider into the Basque Country, employs about 80,000 people, and where the employees govern the firm. The workers elect the boards, and there's a fixed ratio of earnings between the top and the bottom. So, no astronomical chief executive salaries. This is related to what workers get paid. When it came to the financial crisis, the employment in Mondragon co-ops was much more stable than in commercial firms because instead of making people redundant, they shared out the work that there was to try and sustain everyone through that difficult time. I think in the late 20 teens, the fridge factory did actually close, but it was the only one of the co-ops and the rest have kept going. And that area has really benefited in its prosperity. Switch to Cleveland, Ohio, a town in the United States on the edge of the Great Lakes that made cars. The car industry left. 3 steelworks closed during the 80s. The financial crisis was particularly acute there, lots of poverty and unemployment. So a group called the Democracy Collaborative thought, well, who is employing people here? Who's not going to leave? Perhaps we can work with them. They looked at they signed up the city council, the 2 universities, 2 hospitals, and looked at how much of their spending came from outside the area. So they saw what was needed, what was missing, and they set up 3 large cooperatives in the poorest areas of Cleveland to supply the goods and services that these big institutions needed. And the first was a big laundry, 2009, then a solar energy company, 2010, and then a food growing business in huge greenhouses. And these succeeded in providing good jobs for poor and vulnerable groups, including people who'd just come out of prison with non-violent records and immigrants. So, what that meant, because their employees were the owners of the businesses, when profits were distributed, these went to their own workers and would be spent in their neighborhoods. And through the multiplier, they would support the incomes in their own areas. Now, move to Britain. We're looking at Preston, a city in Lancashire which lost half its budget between 2011 and 2014 during the financial crisis. Already, it had many poor areas with a low life expectancy. So the city council, an executive called Matthew Brown, went to the university, found the Centre for Local Economic Studies, and with them identified large institutions, anchor institutions, as in Cleveland, who weren't going away. 6 of them signed up: the city council, the county council, the police, the housing association, and the 2 colleges. And what they did made a real difference. Together, they had a spending power of 1.2 billion a year, only 5% which was spent locally. So they changed their procurement process, and they tried to procure more locally to support local incomes. And in doing that, they had to work with local firms, local businesses, and they set up a co-op development unit at Lancaster University to generate new co-ops, which would earn and spread income. The result was that in the late 20 teens, Preston was voted as the most improved town in the UK. So prosperity was really fostered in that area. So that has shown some of the differences that co-ops can make. I'd like to kind of take another perspective now and look at what in UK we call social enterprises. Caroline might introduce some other terms. So in UK law, it's a business which carries out trading for community benefit. The constitution of a social enterprise has to specify what that benefit is. It needs to focus on a community need. Its assets have to be looked. That means if it goes bust, the assets have to be transferred to something with similar aims. They can be charities, but don't have to be. Common forms in the UK are community interest companies, CICs or KICs. They have a board, they can trade, issue shares, they have an asset lock, and the benefit must be in the constitution. Another common form is a community benefit society, which is also a co-op set up for, again, a specified community benefit and trades to achieve that aim. It doesn't matter how much individual shareholders own, they still only get one vote. So it makes things more equal, a democratic community. This is one of many community energy companies that have been set up in UK. This is one I helped set up. It's a co-op producing renewable energy, and I through solar PV on large roofs, and they raised £390,000 to the working capital in 3 weeks in autumn 2015. It also runs a community fund to support local projects, and like other similar institutions, it has one member, one vote. It looks quite cheerful, and it is. Here's another social enterprise. It's a producers co-op. It's called Peasant Evolution. It's in Dorset, and it was set up to support small food producers, organic and sustainable land management enterprises, and also rural crafts and handmade goods. Its aims include health as well as supporting these sustainable producers. And it has market stalls in the local towns, including Bridport. It ran a training course in traditional construction methods, which is oak, green oak, all fastened together with wooden pegs. And that's the result. A beautiful barn on the small farm, Fivepenny Farm. I could sing you a song about them. They're so wonderful. And it has a bottling plant, which members can use every week. A lot of produce comes here and is distributed into food boxes for their membership. And they also run courses and community gatherings and feasts and celebrations in the barn. Here's a different kind of social enterprise. A community land trust is an entity which has trustees. It can also have members. It can own land and property. Throughout Britain, there are also quite a number of community land trusts, and usually they are set up to provide housing, affordable housing, and housing for social rent in most cases. But some of them are sold to make a scheme viable. And but community land trusts can also own a community shop or a pub or hold some other thing. The two pictures at the beginning are the homes for social rent that a community land trust in my village we set up, and it was successfully able to provide these homes. Here's another area where social enterprises have worked well. So Northeast Dartmoor is quite a rural area with scattered population, and it was very hard to get social care there because it involved long travelling distances from the nearest town. So Nedcare set up a charitable incorporated organisation, a CIO, which is actually a charity, but it's regulated by the Care Quality Commission, to meet the needs for social care in these communities. And what it did was to recruit people to provide care in their village or town. So very close to them to minimise care travel time. And so there are quite a lot of people who had the relevant skills who were able to do a bit in their own community. The people receiving the care pay for it, but there is fundraising, there are donations. And so if people can't afford it, then they can still receive the social care that they need. So it may be that different kinds of enterprises of the sort that I've outlined would make a difference to this pattern where we see that economic growth doesn't always help the poorest. The bottom picture, the red line, is the poorest fifth, and you can see that inequality has increased recently. And I'm afraid that trend has been sustained. So that even though the economy is growing, it's better off people who benefit, and the same in the US, but more so. So our new economy can be grown piecemeal. Of course, we can help it along by living, ourselves according to our values and by nurturing the gift relationship in our communities. But we can also choose to buy from enterprises with public good at their heart, the kind that I've been talking about, charity shops, co-ops, and social enterprises. And I think I want to say also that when we are um, aware of the disadvantages of commercial profit-making enterprises, we may not want to include things like the corner shop, which know their community and respond to them. We're talking about big companies like those that own the water industry in Britain, who seem to prefer to pay dividends and pay large salaries to their CEOs than to invest in keeping sewage out of our water, out of our rivers and coasts. So, in our purchasing decisions, we can help transformation. And even more so by building alliances and developing or supporting our alternatives that we have locally, our democratic, our green and social enterprises, such as those I've mentioned. And local authorities can help them along too by supporting them with their purchasing, where they get their procurement from. They can put a premium on things, social value, and our education institutions can support the development of co-ops and social enterprises. So that's basically what I want to say. And I think this quote from Wendell Berry expresses the potential in an interesting way because there can be big changes, as in Preston and Cleveland, Ohio, but there can also be small changes that we all support, and together they add up. The real work of planet saving will be small, humble, and humbling, and insofar as it involves love, pleasing, and rewarding, its jobs will be too many to count, too many to report, too many to be publicly noticed or rewarded, too small to make anyone rich or famous, but can involve us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. That was almost exactly 20 minutes. Thank you. Um, so we have time for questions and answer. We can start with 5 minutes, and if it goes on for a little bit more, I think that would be okay as well. So just feel free to ask any questions related to this first. We'll also have a question and answer after Caroline's presentation. Let's see.
I will definitely share the slides with you. I think I may just have sent them to you, Rory and Ron, so you will be able to receive them. I've tried to make them so they're self-explanatory, but I'm open to questions too.
Thank you very much.
I see Ruth's hands up.
Jill, in terms of the way the disparity in wealth has opened up over the past few years. Can you explain a bit more about what's going on in that graph? I think we've all probably got our ideas, but with your economic knowledge, how do you make sense of that?
I'm not an expert on that, but I think that in an ordinary capitalist economy, there is an inbuilt tendency for rich to get richer. So if we just think, people, who is it who are lending money? They're people who are better off and they're receiving a return from that money. And who is borrowing money? It's people who are worse off and they're having to pay, interest charges. So debt is a big part of that process. And interest payments are, on the whole, a payment from poor to rich. But also sometimes poor people pay more for what they get because they don't buy in bulk. So I think, Rochdale pioneers were to buy in bulk and sell to people at lower prices. And there are a lot of little whole food purchasing groups and co-ops that buy in bulk and distribute, buying from Essentials and Suma and, ethical wholesalers like that and sharing it out. But I'm sure there are other dynamics, and I'll have a think about that. It is inherent, I think, in a capitalist economy to increase inequality. And there is some counterbalance to that in government policy on benefits and taxation. But maybe that counterbalance hasn't been enough. Jonathan, is that your hand up?
Yeah, yes. Just to add to that, I mean, not only I think the government's sort of taxation policy hasn't been enough, but in some ways it's counterproductive. It favours a lesser taxation on wealth than it does on income, so I mean, what basically happens is that once people have got quite a bit of money, the money generates further money faster than anything that poorer people can do. So that, and then you start getting these obscene levels of wealth that really are part of the system. Though it's taken a while to develop this far, it's certainly inherent, and I think governments are frightened to deal with it because they need, or they think they need, the capital to come to this country or to be used, and they're frightened of frightening it off by imposing the sort of charges that ought to be imposed. So that's my take on it in part, just adding a note.
Thank you for mentioning that, Jonathan. So investment income is taxed at a lower rate than earned income, when it probably ethically might be the other way around. But you also mentioned or hinted at the possibility of taxing wealth, which we don't do. There was another question. Ron.
It's for in the case of Preston, and I think it was also the case of in Cleveland. You indicated one of the key elements was the decision by local authorities and others to purchase locally, and this kept the money in the community and had a lot of spin-off benefits. One of the problems, I think, in recent years has been the international, not only national and international rules that have required that bids to provide services or goods must be completely open worldwide, and no preference locally. So I'm wondering how Preston and Cleveland managed to do what they did.
I don't think, I think there are two different processes there, but what they did was to state that they would prefer a local supplier, and they would give it, an extra 10% in a procurement, putting something out to bid. So they would give a weighting to local suppliers. And this was clearly in accord with policies that they denunciated. I don't know, whether there is now anything that would prevent that, but I think that is a practice that's been adopted in several other areas, including North Ayrshire. Clare's, the Centre for Local Economic Studies, has been doing consultancy with quite a few local authorities in Britain who've wanted to do the same thing as Preston. And it is now, it's called community wealth building, and it's a sort of more well-known procedure. So it's not illegal, but I couldn't tell you the detail. Lindsay.
Hi, Jill. And sorry to be late. It was wonderful to hear your presentation. I just have two questions. The discussions of tax, if you have any reflections. One is something that strikes me very much in hearing is that wealth is no longer an income, it's in assets, and therefore we're not taxing where wealth is. So it links to what you're saying about the investments, but I wondered if that was something you wanted to reflect on. And the other one was having lived in Britain, but then moving to Germany and originally from the States, I suddenly realized, oh my goodness, there is no land tax in the UK. And I wanted to ask if that was something that's ever discussed, because it is phenomenal that you can own thousands of acres and not have a land tax in the UK, whereas you have a council tax for a house, and that's often seen as something that needs to be readjusted, but politicians are afraid to.
Is there a land tax in Germany?
Well, there's a land tax in the US, but in Germany, I can't answer that. We certainly have a council tax that's related to probably more equitable in that size, but I will get back to you on that. I'll let you know.
I would hesitate to suggest it in the current situation where a lot of family farms are suffering from the inheritance tax because they're worth far more nominally than £1 million, and often land enterprises make very small margins. But there is a very strong argument for a land value tax at a high level. And, there's a whole literature about it. Look up land value tax. So I think there is a strong argument for that, provided it doesn't hurt family farms. And I would be interested to talk further about it if we get to it. Thank you, Lindsay. That's good to hear. Paul.
Yes, I wanted to ask about the systems that don't cross over into standard economics, like lets and time banks and gift economies. And when I was, we started a time bank where the unit of exchange is 1 hour, regardless of what anybody's capable of. 1 hour equals 1 hour, in a fairly poor area of Sheffield, next to the general practice, next to the family practice. And there were two things. One is that we got many more offers of help than we got requests for help. And two, it was just too big a leap from the market economy for people to make. It was just really hard to get them to think, even with the doctors saying, why don't you do this? You're great at gardening, and you need somebody to do some painting or whatever it is, whatever the exchange was. It was very hard to get it believable. And I wondered if you had any comments about that, because they're much easier to start, those things, but they're quite difficult to get going. We failed after 2 years. It shut.
Our local lets system folded, but after about a decade. And in the course of that decade, I think some people got what they needed when they couldn't have got it otherwise, in terms of physical help for disabled people, psychological therapies and physical therapies. It's difficult to keep going. It takes a lot of energy, and maybe there needs to be a source of money so people can be paid for managing it. But I just take your comment, Paul, that it's difficult to keep these things going. They can be precious in certain respects. Thank you for bringing that up. Phoebe.
Yeah, thank you. Just further to that, it is finding the people with the strength, the energy and the time to put into a local project. you know, and how we support those people. I think Quaker peacemakers, Quaker community builders. I mean, Claire's has done a Green New Deal in Oldham. There is quite a lot going on, but what I found, you know, there were people who might have done it anyway. You know, you find a community asset, an anchor organisation or something, and you try and make something of it because the institutions, well, have lost resources, staff, and the will. So a lot does come back to individuals and how we support them with these various options, alternatives. And time banking is about trust. You know, if you can build community trust, that's a big plus.
I think it's formalizing something that tended to happen in communities anyway. You know, somebody looks after somebody, a neighbour pops in to see to an elderly person and things. But our communities don't always have those links, and the time bank can make the links. But thank you for making those points. I think that's very relevant.
Well, thank you very much. I'm cognizant that we have Caroline waiting in the wings. So Caroline is going to be doing the next presentation, which should be about 10 minutes. Thanks, Caroline.
You and thanks. I haven't been waiting in the wings. I haven't just been waiting in the wings. I've been listening attentively and really very interested to hear these different experiences. And Jill, thank you for those different stories and inspirations that you shared. So I was asked to speak a little bit about, well, on the same topic, and I wanted to talk from my experience in Geneva. I'm based in Geneva, and I'm a member of the local social and solidarity economy network. And so it was very interesting because I think a lot of what I'm going to say is going to really echo what Jill said, coming from a sort of different context and approach and some challenges. We live in a very different context. I mean, Geneva is quite privileged. I mean, despite social spending cuts and various challenges on the whole, sort of public services do work fairly well. There is extreme inequality, but that's more because the upper end is higher. There are probably far less people in the vulnerable end than in the UK. But the Social and Solidarity Economy Network in Geneva was created in 2004 by a group of people who felt that people working in different sectors, so it might be people working in theatre, people working with people with disabilities, people working for organic farming locally, people in these different sectors had common concerns, common objectives, common aims, and common values. So the idea was to bring these people together and to create a movement to work together for to better sort of support those kind of values. So I think it's probably one of the earlier networks of these types. Certainly it has grown significantly. So now there are some 800 members, 450 or so are enterprises, social and solidarity economy enterprises, accounting for 6,000 jobs and about 600 million Swiss francs of annual turnover, which I think is about 500 million pounds, I think, about thereabouts. So we feel quite proud because we feel that's quite strong compared to sort of the sort of more private sector conservative business associations. It's tiny. They have the order of 29,000 members and account for I don't know how many thousand jobs, but still we feel that we have a sort of solid base. And then, as I said, there are about 400 or 500 individual members. So, it's good to have there for support as well. Most of the activity of the network is quite micro. And I'll come back to this later, why I find this a challenge, but also I've increasingly grown to think that it is a strength. And Jill, thank you. Some of your comments really helped me see it differently. You were talking about how it grows piecemeal, how it sort of grows up, how sort of these systems change. occur from small actions. So I think that's really heartening for me to hear. So what the network does most of all, or spends most of its time on, is supporting the social and solidarity enterprises. So it might just be simple things like somebody who has got an idea, who wants to get a sort of, a business off the ground, might come to us and say, I don't know how to do a business plan, or, who can I turn to for financing? Or it might be, I mean, one organization came to us recently, it was a group of friends basically, who were like brewing beer with local, an organic brewing, and as a cooperative and so on. And they opened a bar and everything was going very well. And then somebody said to them, but I think they wanted to get some funding, or they wanted to get, anyway, something or other. And somebody said to them, but where are your accounts? And they're like, well, what accounts? So, sometimes it can be quite basic sort of nuts and bolts things like that. And then we sort of create conditions in which these enterprises can flourish. And so one of the sort of strong axes at the moment is what we call quartier une seule planète. So that's a one planet neighborhoods. So the idea in Geneva is quite a lot of new development. There's been a severe housing shortage, and there are quite a few new sort of whole developments, whole sort of neighborhoods being built. And luckily enough, we have the support of the authorities or the administration, and that we are in sort of as these neighborhoods are being conceived and built, and with the idea of provisioning. We're not quite there yet. These neighborhoods are still being built, so it's a big sort of risk for us in a sense, but we believe strongly that if in the neighborhood you can provide what people need in terms of community services, in terms of meeting points, in terms of food provisioning in a way from local producers that's sustainably produced and so on, if you can have, what do you call them? Do you call them repair cafes, or here we call them ressourceries? So it's places where something that you don't need anymore might be something that's highly valuable to me. So, create those spaces for exchange. Libraries of things. I don't know how you say that. I think you have that yeah, so as well. So the idea is to factor these in as the neighborhoods are being built. Also shared mobility structures, car sharing, how do you say that? Vélo cargo, transport, bicycle sharing, those kind of things. So that's a big activity of ours. And then we have a sort of policy advocacy role as well, which in my view, and here again, that was my earlier point, Jill, about how, to my mind, I'm always the voice within the network who's saying we should be doing more advocacy. We should be thinking about what kind of economic system we want. How do we get economic system change? And it's really only in the last few months that I've become more at peace and seen the power of building up, growing up from the bottom in a sense, and the strength there is in these sort of daily activities to, in a sense, to practice the kind of economic change that we want to see. To join the network, we have criteria, so it's not defined by the legal status. I think this is sometimes a confusion when people talk about social enterprises or social and solidarity economy enterprises. Often people think, well, it has to be a co-op, and then the co-op automatically sort of defines it. And I think in Switzerland, we're very alert to that not being the case. And so we have quite a strict set of criteria. And in fact, it's something that feedback we often get about how our criteria are quite stringent, and the sort of joining process is quite complicated. I put it there in the chat in case anybody's interested. But so one, it's regardless of the legal structure, the enterprises or even individual members have to respect a certain number of values. The points that you mentioned, Jill, really, things like income, there's a limit of the highest paid and the lowest paid is maximum 5 times as much. In fact, in practice, it's 1.8%, 1.8 times, but the rule is 5 times. So criteria like that. So I wanted to mention some of the challenges that we have. So one is, I already mentioned, is the grappling with policy. How do you, somebody who's, say, setting up a neighborhood, I don't know, a food co-op, or a creche that's outside in the forests, or, somebody who's sort of developing their own enterprise. How do we sort of bridge this sort of macro framework that can seem very theoretical to people alternative indicators to GDP, an objective different to economic growth. How do we make that real to people who are acting at the micro level? And I don't really have the answers, and maybe it's not necessary, but it's certainly a question, something that I find is quite challenging. I work also sort of with a different hat on trade policy a lot, and I found it nobody I know in the social and solidarity economy movement can articulate to me what a social and solidarity economy response to trade policy in the situation we're seeing today should be. Should it all be we produce things locally? Should it be some level of localization, globalization? Anyway, so I think that there's still a gap there that somebody needs to fill, and it may be more of a sort of thinking role than an action role. Is the other challenge that we face is that we're not well known. I saw the prompt questions for the breakout rooms. So I'm sorry if I'm doing a spoiler here, but one of them is, what can I do? Where can I, how can I procure goods and services I need through social and solidarity economy enterprises? And in Geneva, actually, and probably in the Canton of Vaud as well, you can probably do most things within that, but people simply don't know. So that's another challenge that we face. And the other thing, and I'd be really curious to hear others, whether this is similar in the UK and other countries, is the connotation. In French, you say bobo. It's people who basically kind of, have a lot of, sort of like upper middle class. You've got enough money, so you've got the time to, trek across a town to the farmer's market. You can afford to pay for, I don't know, longer lasting salad spinners rather than the cheap plastic one. So the connotation that we are people like that, and so we don't speak to the people who we feel that would benefit from the sharing economy that we're trying to promote. And that's something that I'm really working hard to try and overcome, to sort of make it more accessible and less kind of elitist. I wanted to make just a couple of comments in response to some points that had been made. One is the extreme wealth line. I'll put a chat. I think one of the things is, I don't know if you've heard of it, it's a concept that I think the New Economics Foundation in the UK and others have put forward, and I think it's really important because I think the chart that you showed, Jill, about the inequality rising shows, the lower end going down, and the upper end is kind of, but if you look at extreme wealth multiplying itself, it is completely unacceptable. And I think it's a really powerful area of focus, and it gets us away from discussions about taxation. I think, Jonathan, you mentioned the point about, countries compete, nobody wants to lose their, sort of these big taxpayers, even if they're paying a tiny % of their income or their wealth to the state, it's still income, right? And you don't want to see them moving to Switzerland or wherever it is, the Virgin Islands or wherever it is, that there's even less tax rates. So we get away from that debate, and we just so the extreme wealth line just asks, at what level is extreme wealth unacceptable? And studies have been done, and again, I won't go on about this too long. I'll put in the chat as well. So the reference is about the societal harms. And I think that's a really strong argument for those of us or those of you who are involved in advocacy. If we talk about the poverty line that, is well known, I think, is sort of basically, I think, any adult would know what the poverty line represents. And that's a harm for an individual, right, who doesn't want to get too close to that line. Whereas extreme wealth poses societal harm, political capture, ownership of the media, social media, and you probably know what those things are. So I think that's sort of, in terms of people involved in advocacy, I think that's a really powerful concept that it's really worth getting behind. The other thing I wanted to talk about is I don't know if anybody is familiar with the offers and needs markets. And this comes to the point made about the exchange. I don't know, was it Paul, you mentioned the exchange, I can't remember what you called it, where you exchange an hour for an hour. The offers and needs market is kind of a creation of a community of offers and needs, and it's very interesting. So one thing is that I wanted to use the term market, and if you think about in many cultures, or even in our countries a while back, the market is where you went. That's where you met people. That's where you found out who's well, who's not well, who should I pop in and look in on because apparently they haven't been so well recently. Who it's where people meet and where people exchange. And now I think market is really associated with the capitalist system, but maybe we should reclaim that term market, or maybe we should use a different term. But I think it's interesting to think about. Certainly the offers and needs market, owns the term market in the sense of saying, let's subvert this sort of capitalist system, and let's provide each other with, goods and services directly without going through a monetary system. So very much the same idea that Paul and I think Jill, you both referred to. And I can share more about it, but it's a wonderful process because, again, you start with asking what people can offer. So in a sense, it's celebrating people's strengths. Oh, actually, yeah, no, I'm really good at, I don't know, I don't think I'm good at anything, but actually, yeah, no, my tomatoes are wonderful. So yeah, I can come and help you, advise you how to plant your tomatoes next year. And then you get to sort of around, people share their offers, and then you go to a round where people share their needs, and it's much easier to ask for needs after you've gone from your strength. So that's another sort of example that I really like of a on the one hand it's sort of subversive of the capitalist system, but on the other hand it's just a very simple and small action that can really make a difference in individuals' lives. And I think you said, Jill, that even though the system you referred to came to an end, that in the period of time when it existed, it was valuable to a number of people.
Thank you, Caroline. That's a wonderful conversation between you and Jill, and well, all of us get to learn so much from you. So thank you very much for that. We are running a little short on time for our 30 minutes of discussion. So I think we'll probably need to shorten it to 20 minutes of discussion, but we can certainly take a few questions here. And if anything occurs to you while we're in the breakouts, then we can come back and answer, have Jill and Caroline answer some of those questions as well, because some of the things might crop up. But for now, are there a few questions before we move into our breakout? Questions for Caroline? Or comments as well?
Just a practical question, Caroline. You said something had 29,000 members. This wasn't in Geneva, I think, was it?
Yes, I mean, yes, it was just to so the different scale, that in terms of, we're glad with how much we've grown and how much more we think we can grow, but yeah, we're still a small fish in the sort of in the economic landscape of Geneva.
So that was LSSN that has 29,000 members.
No, it's called the Fédération des Entreprises Romandes. It's sort of the conservative economic lobby group.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Just to clarify.
Well, oh, I see Lindsay's hand.
Carolyn, I was just talking to a friend who's a counselor in Cologne in Germany, and describing your wonderful place in Geneva and how inspiring it is, and do they do that there? And the answer I got was that city councils don't have budgets to build in the same way. And because I was thinking, it seems like such a no-brainer that when you're creating new building, you should create these community spaces like what you have in Geneva. And I wondered, is it sort of up to communities finding the money and raising, or do you have examples in Switzerland where the cities actually have the budgets that can start gearing housing to do exactly what you live in more rapidly?
Yeah, interesting question. I'm not quite sure I know the whole answer, but just to say that where I live, and just for those of you who are not in Geneva, do come and visit, and I'll show you around where I live, because it's really is a very I find, very inspiring place in many ways. It's a cooperative, it's a housing co-op, and it was founded 30 years ago, 30 something years ago. With in Geneva, there was a huge amount of property speculation, so huge number of empty flats, empty housing, empty office space because of speculation. And so a group of people got together and they said, okay, we are going to demonstrate that it's possible to provide quality housing at low prices. And I joined at the beginning. It was there was a handful of members and, no site, any sort of, bricks or mortar in sight. But it happened. They managed to buy the first property, and then it sort of snowballed quite quickly, and they have demonstrated in that short period of time it is possible to provide quality housing at affordable prices. And so it's a cooperative, and actually in Switzerland, the cooperative, if the land doesn't belong to the owner of the building, so in that sense, the public administration is supportive of it. But not all cooperatives are participatory and have the same kind of values as we do. So we decide, we decide, we manage our building, we manage our budgets, and all the buildings are built. We don't have so much private space, but we have shared space. So we have a common room, if I want to have a party, if I want to play ping pong, we have a space for that. There's a woodworking room, there's a sort of children's playroom, there's a shared laundry room. We have various shared means of transport, bicycles and so on. So in terms of the building itself, yes, that was purely privately funded. The co-op had to raise its own money and go out and borrow and so on. But in a sense, there is support from the state in terms of the land, and the legal structure is recognized by the state. So it's not a very clear and precise answer to your question, Lindsay.
Is that by chance anything that's available sort of as a template or as an example of housing that people could check out?
Yeah, and you know what? I must really tell them to translate their presentation material into English, because I'm always getting asked this question. I had a friend who happened to be a former minister from New Zealand who came to visit, and then she was, texting me wildly from New Zealand saying, I need to talk to people about this, send me information. And so I've put the website there, but I think it's all in French.
Future project. Okay. Well, we have, let's say, 20 minutes to go into breakouts. I'm going to put the questions in the chat, so then they'll be there when we do someone's disappeared. When you're in the breakouts, you'll still be able to see them. So look.
Said in our group that organizations like you who aren't well enough known must find new approaches to getting people to know that you exist, other than the social media or putting an advertisement on television. You must invent ways.
So this was part of the harvesting, is good publicity for projects, getting good projects out there and known. Is that right, Bridget?
Yes, yes. I mean, what we've heard from the speakers is that they're doing or talking about such imaginative approaches, new approaches to old systems and problems and activities. What they also need is a new approach to how to make themselves known. I mean, maybe it's like political parties. You should hire a stand and hand out leaflets to the shoppers and give them a list of your organizations that, or in Caroline's case, a list of these organizations or something.
Building on from what Bridget was saying, in our group, we did talk, as you obviously heard, quite a bit about how people would find out about opportunities and how groups that set themselves up as a social enterprise might need to try to make themselves known in order to thrive. And an example was given of on the internet, it's the big boys who are spending millions on advertising, who otherwise find the ones you would find out about. You wouldn't find out about the little people. Somebody mentioned using eBay as a way of finding out about small entities locally that one could buy from or engage with.
I wanted to mention that I was inspired in our group because somebody said that participating in cooperatives where he lives feels good. And to buy well and to invest in the local. I was thinking that that's really like the opposite of the societal harms that Caroline touched upon. You know, so it's kind of like the part that we don't mention perhaps because we're so concerned about the economic side of it. But, you know, really focusing on how it's an antidote to, you know, consumerism and people feeling stressed and alone and all this kind of stuff is just, you know, the participating in the localness in and of itself creates positive energy, I guess, positivity.
Yes, I would support that. I think somebody said it's not even where you get to, it's the companionship you have on the journey. I think that was in one of our morning meetings for worship. But the companionship on these journeys is great. And all these things, you know, saving the local pub and making it community shop and things like that, it really brings people together.
No, wasn't. Oh.
Well, I think we're rapidly losing people. I'm a little concerned because I was hoping we could have a little bit of a discussion about the future and what our future holds. But I don't want to stop anybody else reporting on things that inspired them or that you'd like to report back from your group. So if we could have a few more, that'd be great.
I am a bit worried by the general reference, the frequent references to local, as if somehow the fact that someone lives near me makes that person more worthy of attention than somebody who lives further away. That's one reason why in our group I talked about buying cocoa from cocoa farmers who produce particularly good cocoa. That means there are some firms who are prepared to go to the other end of the world to find a particular family who produces a product, and that family probably needs my money much more than anybody who lives within 5 kilometers of me. So I think local is the wrong target. I think those whose needs are urgent is the right target.
I think we kind of touched on a different aspect of that in our group when we talked about what is sort of a basic good and service, you know, an essential good or service, and we talk, and you know, that could be provided locally as opposed to from abroad. So in a different way that came up, but I think when we talked about local, we also assumed that we meant I think that we meant sort of certain types. I mean has he gone? The person who was in our group, Ruth and Rory, he was talking about the kind of places that he shopped locally, and they were very much values based. It wasn't that it wasn't solely that they were local. There were other criteria too. And if I may, so go ahead, Jill.
One of the main issues about local, meaning to keep the money circulating in the local economy.
I think that was also in the context of poverty and unemployment. But of course, the solidarity economy, you know, we need to make links with people in countries where our custom it can do more good than it can do in a rich country. And I, you know, can completely see the point that you made there about that. So you know, there's a point for local, but there's also a point for solidarity, and we have to.
I think the point that Ron was making is particularly ironic, since we both live in the Geneva area, it's one of the richest corners of the world, and to say we're cozily shuffling the money around among us wealthy people, well, jolly good. How does that help those who really need a livelihood and need income and need capital to work with? You want to leave here and go and look for the people who need it.
But I think I think that's one dimension of it, but I think I had the impression that when we were talking about local, we assumed, yeah, sort of the values-driven local as well, that we were focusing on that more than other things. And maybe just another sort of dimension of that I meant to mention, because I think it came up about cooperatives, that we talk about cooperatives, and in many circles I'm involved in, people say, oh, you know, cooperative, as if by definition a cooperative is more, you know, ethical or fair or transparent than other types of ownership. In Switzerland, actually, the two big main supermarket chains are cooperatives, and they have appalling impacts on, well, for instance, you know, they drive, if we